Welcome to episode 33 of Travelling Science. G'day legends, welcome back to Travelling Science, the podcast that's sharing science with the world. My name's Crowe and I'm the travelling scientist coming to you today from Lorne in Australia. I'm a health science communicator, and on this podcast we interview doctors, researchers and experts, hearing their stories and sharing their ideas that can help us to live smarter, happier and healthier lives. Today's guest is Dr. Paul Mason, Chief Investigator for Fresh Produce Bioactives. He's an anthropologist who I actually met at the Australian Science Communicators Conference in Melbourne, Australia earlier this year. And he was such a fascinating and funny guy with a really important message that I just needed to share with the world. So I asked him if he'd come on the podcast, and I'm so glad that he did. I'm super excited for you to listen to this episode where Paul is going to be answering questions like, what are bioactive compounds? How to get more bioactives into your diet? Why taking supplements is often a waste of money? Are frozen vegetables less healthy than fresh? How we should be storing our foods? And why we should all slow down and take more time for ourselves. And we'll also be discussing things like food preservation, siestas, board games, Louis Pasteur, dancing, Turkish food, martial arts, anthropology, microbiological gossip, and dung beetles. So let's slip and slide into this delectable episode, learning all about how we can better use bioactives to improve our lives, with the one, the only, Dr. Paul Mason. Dr. Paul Mason, welcome to Travelling Science.
Thanks so much, Jesse. Great to be here. Love your work.
Thank you, my man. It was fantastic meeting you at the Australian Science Communicators Conference last week. We got to learn a lot and have good, fun conversations.
It was a fantastic event. I had such a good time meeting everyone there, and it was such a blast sitting next to you and cracking jokes up the back. It was good. No, we were the good kids. What were the good kids? What was I saying? We were up the front.
Yeah, we were down the front taking notes. I would love to start this conversation by just asking you, what are you currently working on?
Okay, so I'm currently working on a project called Fresh Produce Bioactives. It's funded by Hort Innovation and supported by levies from the vegetable industry and from the onion industry. And we are looking at translating the science of bioactives into something palatable for the public, meaning that we want to help people understand the science of these compounds that are health modulating in fruits and vegetables and nuts and mushrooms, and help people understand just why these are such a great option for your weekly supermarket shop.
Yeah, why people should be doing most of their shopping in the fruits and vegetables in that greengrocer section which is like one little corner of the supermarket. And then there's so many shelves of I don't even know what. But yeah, I think most of the good stuff is right there when you first walk in.
It's crazy, isn't it, when you think about, like, even the health food section doesn't have fresh produce in it. And the health food section is the fresh produce section. And everything, 80-90% of the supermarket that's wrapped in plastic and cardboard and who knows what else, that stuff with long shelf life is not fresh. And fresh, particularly when it comes to these health benefiting compounds in fruits and vegetables, is best.
Definitely. Can you just explain again, what exactly are bioactive compounds?
What are bioactives? This is an interesting question, and it's the first question that a lot of people ask, and me included, when I came to work on this topic. And I'm not sure that we're asking the right question, because if we ask the question, what are bioactives? People go, it's the lycopene in tomatoes, it's the flavonoids, the polyphenols, it's the zeaxanthin, the luteins, the non-essential ingredients or the non-essential compounds in fresh fruit and vegetables or in plant produce or in whole foods. And the reason I find that question a little short of where we really should get to is because the compounds themselves are not the health modulating thing. It's the compounds within the context of the whole food and the synergies between those compounds when you combine ingredients, like when you combine olive oil and tomatoes, turmeric and pepper. When you combine these ingredients in certain ways, it creates certain synergies, and it's those synergies that help those compounds to do the magic in your body. So what are bioactives is a limiting question in my mind. I would prefer to ask the question, what is bioactive? Because it orients our attention differently. When we pick up a food, we're asking the question, is this bioactive? Is it going to be alive in my body, or is it just giving me calories so that I can run a marathon? And when I phrase the question in that way, what is bioactive? I'm also trying to point the finger at saying that a lot of our food industry is rallied behind or organized behind delivering calories, delivering carbohydrates, proteins, fats, sugars, but not necessarily delivering health. Meaning that, yeah, we're getting the calories into people, we're making sure people are not hungry, we're making sure that they're not deficient on the absolute essential nutrients that we know will lead to death if they don't get them over the course of a week or a few weeks. But bioactives have sort of escaped that radar. Bioactive compounds have escaped that radar for a while because their effects are much more cumulative and contextual over longer periods of time. And so people can, quote unquote, call them non-essential, but they are health modulatory, which is paradoxical. And I think part of the reason that they have escaped the radar is because we have a food industry that is very much geared behind a sort of a military model of getting food out to the troops. And I'm not using that metaphor lightly. Canned food came from the Napoleonic era. Many of the preservatives that we have in food today come from the Second World War.
I never really thought about this, but of course food preservation was a priority for the military. Canned food was invented in France to feed Napoleon's army, and chemical preservatives were created during World War II to increase the shelf life of foods being sent to the soldiers overseas. But some of these preservatives are linked with various health issues like cancers, asthma, allergies, and gut problems.
And those preservatives are still used in food today. And the question is that those foods with long shelf life, are they bioactive? Well, they're not as bioactive as something fresh that's still got all those health modulating compounds intact in a much more bioavailable matrix than you would get it if they were just supplemented into a breakfast cereal.
Yeah, I have to admit that when I had breakfast this morning, my first thought was, I'm chatting with Paul today. He's going to be talking about healthy food. This is going to be a healthy breakfast. And so I'm looking around and I was looking at the fresh fruit bowl and I started grabbing out bits of fruit and making up like a little kind of the healthiest version of a light cereal and fruit salad I could, because I was trying to make a bioactive breakfast. So I feel like I'm on the right path. But yeah, we want to be thinking about that all the time, I guess, or getting people to think about that a little bit more rather than just grabbing whatever packaged food is there.
Yeah, can I jump in there? And that's a really good point. Like, you might not have known all the names of all the bioactive compounds in all the fruits that you're putting into your breakfast. And that, for me, doesn't matter. I mean, it's my job description to teach people about those bioactive compounds, to let them know why they're health modulatory. But this is why I also want to shift the question from what are bioactives to what is bioactive, because if it's living, if it's come off a tree, if it's come out of the ground, then if it's bioactive because it's fresh, then it's probably good for you. And humans have selected the best plant produce for our bodies over thousands of years. And that range of plant produce in amongst the biodiversity of the planet is actually quite small, but we've been very selective about that because we've learned through trial and error what works for our bodies, and what works for our bodies is fresh.
I agree. I do have one question I've been thinking about while studying for this. When we're talking about these bioactives, things like quercetin and lycopene and the many others with the names that are difficult to say, there's all these claims like, oh, it boosts the immune system, it's good for heart health, it reduces inflammation. How do you prove something like that? How do scientists know that quercetin is good for the brain, for example?
I actually really love this question. I think it's a really important question. How do we prove that these compounds are good for us? And I love this question because I think it's another example of a question that is flawed. Because if we're just looking at what is good about the compound in our bodies, we're forgetting about the food matrix. You can have supplements that sound all really fancy and great, and they've got certain claims on them, and we should definitely make sure that we talk about how the supplement industry makes those claims, because there's a whole arena of conversation we should have there. But in focusing on the compound, when they extract it from, say, quercetin, they might extract it from onions or apples and then distill it, concentrate it, pack it into a pill, and then sell it on a supermarket shelf. The question is, how do we know that quercetin is bioavailable? And by that, I mean, how do we know it's going to be readily absorbed by the body? And how do we know it's going to go to the places in your body that it needs to go? To give you an example of that, you might extract a bioactive from raspberries, and then the person selling you these supplements might say, oh, hey, Jesse, this extract per pill has much higher concentration of the bioactive compound of interest than if you were just to eat a punnet of raspberries. In fact, you would have to eat 5 punnets of raspberries a day just to get the same amount of this compound that you might get in this tablet. They might say something like that. But the question is, in some cases, you actually, if the compound is in a matrix that makes it bioavailable to your body, that means that your body can absorb it, then it doesn't necessarily have to be in high concentrations. You just need a little bit of it every day. Its effects will be cumulative and contextual. And those tablets remove the context. In fact, even when you supplement it back into a processed food, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be absorbed by your body. We've learned about that from calcium, chromium. We know that if you want chromium in your diet, best to go out and eat chromium-rich whole foods or plant foods. If you have chromium in a tablet, it generally doesn't get absorbed by the body. And then calcium is another one. We're learning that, you need calcium and something else in order for it to be absorbed by your body. Actually, and then you hit a plateau of how much your body can absorb at any one particular time. And it's very nuanced. But if you're eating a healthy diet, if you're incorporating yogurt and berries and all these things into your diet and having a varied diet over the course of a week, then cumulatively you're going to be getting those bioactives into your diet. Now, the question was, how does science make those claims about the benefits of those compounds? Now, I think this is where there's a blurry line between science and marketing. Because sometimes we don't actually have the science to prove that particular compound is the thing making a difference. But what we do have is observational studies showing that people on the Mediterranean diet have healthier lives, have longer lives, have a better gut microbiome. There's all these indicators of good health. We can see if people eat a diet rich in leafy greens, we see all these health benefits of people who have 20 mils of olive oil as part of a diet every day. So we've got a lot of observational studies which lead us to believe that there's a correlation between those foods and someone's health. Now, marketing is obviously dominated by the pharmaceutical industry and the supplement industry. Now, the pharmaceutical industry is interested in things that they can turn into something that they can patent. They're interested in IP, copyright. They want to make sure that if they're selling this drug, that all the royalties go to them. And there's a really fascinating history about that dates back to streptomycin with Selman Waksman, who wasn't actually the discoverer of streptomycin. It was actually his student.
Alrighty, here's some tea for you. Apparently, Albert Schatz, PhD student, discovered the antibiotic streptomycin in 1943, which was the first effective treatment against tuberculosis. But his supervisor, Selman Waksman, took all of the credit. He was like, yep, discovered it all by myself. Ends up winning a Nobel Prize for it, and Schatz was like, oh no you didn't, and ended up suing Selman Waksman, and eventually Albert won a share of the discovery, and now they are both officially co-discoverers of streptomycin. Wow, drama in the microbiology world. Anyway, here's what Selman Waksman actually did do.
Selman Waksman figured out how to take something that was produced naturally and make an argument that by enhancing the laboratory production of that particular compound, you could slap some rights on it to make sure that all the profits go to one particular organization. So pharmaceutical companies are interested in that, which means that if it's naturally occurring and it doesn't need to be enhanced by a laboratory protocol, then the pharmaceutical industry is not that interested in it. They're not going to be able to change a methyl group here or a hydroxy group there in order to turn it into a synthetic product that they can patent. But the supplement industry is not as interested in R&D, perhaps. That might be a hypothesis. But they make money off the ability to make claims about the benefits of compounds. And most of those claims are made off the back of observational studies, of in vitro studies that, or animal models where we've observed certain correlations. And you'll see the way that they word these things very carefully. Now, what this results in is an absence of research into the health benefits of just natural products. There's an absence of research into the microbiome because you can't patent Saccharomyces cerevisiae boulardii the same way that you can patent cycloserine. And so what happens then is we end up with a marketing machine that rallies behind products that can be patented or that profits off the back of an absence of research. So if there's an absence of research clearly delineating the link between a supplement and an outcome, but there's evidence to suggest that there is a link between that compound and the health benefit, then they can put things on the bottles of tablets that say boosts the immune system, boosts your brain, or traditionally used in Ayurveda, or all these lovely claims which have a wonderful placebo. And I'm a sucker for a placebo. You can see all my old bottles up the back there. But what it also means is that we are holding the supplement industry to a different set of values to the standards to which we uphold the pharmaceutical industry. And the consequence of that is that in a society that's seduced by science, but also a bit wary of science, people will find themselves turning to supplements when they don't need them. And people might be steering away from the fresh produce, not because the fresh produce doesn't contain that bioactive, but because maybe they don't understand that they're better off getting their quercetin from an apple or from an onion, even if it's an onion soup or even if it's an apple custard dessert or something. As long as it's fresh apples in there, you're going to be getting that quercetin. And people are getting seduced by the supplement industry and maybe not knowing enough about the bioactive compounds, but also perhaps being seduced by the long shelf life that you get from supplements, not realizing that the questions about bioavailability and degradation still hold for the pills in, the powders in pills that we would ask when we're asking about how long the apple remains bioactive, or how long the avocado or the cucumber remains bioactive.
There's so many places we could go from that conversation. I feel like we covered a lot of topics just now, but just going off that last thing you said, I know so many people will choose not to buy so many fruits and vegetables because they're only going to last a couple of days in the fridge and too busy. And whereas if you buy something with a longer shelf life, it's easier to access a week from now. You don't have to worry about having to throw it out or anything. But I do love what you are doing is essentially telling people fruits and vegetables are healthy. Don't forget that. and it seems like everybody, I would argue that everyone can agree that fruits and vegetables are healthy. But for some reason, there's still not, I don't know, there's like a problem there. There's something missing.
Look, I'm not going to lie. It's a great job description to be paid to tell people that fresh fruit and vegetables are healthy for you. It's such a different job description to, marketing for a big
pharmaceutical company that's selling something that you don't believe in.
I'm not going to name any names. No, but it's great to be just focusing on a positive message about fruits and vegetables. And in some of our research, we've started trialing a new citizen food ethnography methodology, which is the idea of turning everyday citizens into anthropologists. And so they document, they observe their actions and choices and behaviors in the supermarket, in their kitchen, among their family, or or if they're eating on their own, how it feels to prepare the meal, consume the meal, also to forage for the meal at the supermarket, and to stop at each moment and just write down your thoughts, feelings, and notice what you're doing and how you're making those decisions. And we've only run a trial so far. We've had about 40 or so people test out the citizen food ethnography methodology. And one of the biggest overwhelming result of that study so far, that pilot, has been the self-reports of people who have done it saying to me, Paul, it was so good to just slow down and really think about why I'm buying what I buy. And people were buying less of those products that stare you in the face while you're waiting in the queue to pay for your goods. All those chalky treats that are just so tempting while you're waiting to get to the cashier. So a few people reported buying less of those because they became much more aware of their decision making, and much more aware of how they were circumnavigating their anxieties in order to make decisions about their weekly or bi-weekly shop. And so maybe part of the hurdle in getting people to eat much more fresh produce is not just informing them that fresh produce is good for you, not because you get all the proteins and fats and carbohydrates from all that packaged food, but what you're not necessarily going to be getting in a nice bioavailable form is all the bioactives in the fresh produce. So nudging and steering people towards the fresh produce is part of the equation, but we don't want to create more anxiety of, oh gosh, but it's just so much work to make sure that I eat the avocado on the day that it's ripe. Or, I just feel that the produce goes off within a day, and if I don't eat it within a day. But then when people become cognizant of those decisions, they're like, oh, you know what? It wouldn't hurt me just to do a shop much more regularly and buy fresh produce than to go to the shops only once a week and buy a lot of long shelf life food. And because it does require a little bit of coordination and resource management to make sure that you have your onions before they go off. And part of that is knowing how to store them too, make sure you put onions and garlics in a dark, cool pantry. Put your tomatoes in the fridge if you want them for a long time, but if you really want to make that bioactive punch really powerful, then, keep them out of the fridge and consume them sooner.
If you don't already do this, store onions and garlic in dark places. In fact, most foods should be stored in a cool, dark place to naturally preserve them for longer. See, light and temperature changes can trigger the over-ripening and breakdown of fruits and vegetables, and it can also damage things like spices, oils, and even canned foods. I think something that I try to live by is focus on your food. And I mean, specifically when you're eating it, it's also good to be thinking about what you're buying when you're at the shops and everything. But when you are sitting down to a meal, putting the phone away, turning the TV off, and just focusing on what you're eating, I think that is super important as well. And that would probably help remind you that, oh, this is going to be a bioactive meal. This is going to make me feel good tomorrow and later today. And in the long term, this is good for my health, as opposed to, and if you do that with something that is not so healthy, if you focus on and, enjoy it, but be like, probably shouldn't be eating this. Maybe I should cut back on this fried chicken chips or whatever it is. But anyway, focus on your food is something that I try to live by. One thing I wanted to touch on quickly is, would you speak to the cost at all? I know some people can say like, oh, if I want to buy all the ingredients to make a big healthy salad, it can add up quickly, 40, 50, 60. You could spend up to $100 in one shop just to get some nice healthy fresh fruits and ingredients, or where you could go to the freezer section and get a microwave meal for $6 on special and save a lot of time and effort. Yeah, I think cost can sometimes be a big concern.
Look, nothing wrong with nothing wrong with frozen food. In fact, I think just trying to recall from memory, snap frozen peas, for example, snap frozen carrots. I think they're always really good to have in the freezer. And the important thing is just to get them into your diet. And a nice rule of thumb, and this comes from one of my colleagues, is if it's a packet of frozen peas or frozen vegetables, have a look at the ingredients. If it's just that vegetable, then chances are it's probably pretty good for you. But if it's a prepared meal, then you don't necessarily know everything that's in it. If it's more than 4 ingredients, then you're treading into the territory of processed foods and ultra-processed foods, which we know are definitively bad for your health. And it's not to moralize food in a way that weighs on our conscience, because that's not, if you enjoy eating a snack, enjoy it. Like, you don't want to have that horrible dual signaling of this is so good on the lips, but a week on the hips or something. What is it?
A moment on the lips, a lifetime on the hips.
That's the one. That is not necessarily healthy eating, not because of the compounds in what you're eating, but because of the mindset behind it. Absolutely enjoy snack time. Like, humans we are like any animal. We're built to enjoy what we consume. But humans particularly are the ones who moralize our food. And that's quite a recent phenomenon. Humans have had food taboos for a long time, but moralizing food as good and bad is a very recent invention. We didn't really start talking about good food and bad food until we were mass producing it and being sold on incredibly sugar-rich drinks and very unhealthy snacks. But they're better described as discretionary foods rather than junk foods, because it's something that, you can enjoy every now and then. But you've got to know that when you have an ultra-processed snack, it has been engineered to make you feel hungry after you've finished it. And there's a difference between just reading that and knowing it and then just going back and eating a whole bag of lollies and then documenting your experiences about that. How does this make me feel? And when we start thinking about bioactives, we start thinking about how our body feels, not just how our mouth feels. And 20 minutes after a nice bioactive rich meal, most people report that we've done our pilot study. Most people report, wow, I feel so much more nourished. And if I'm eating unhealthy food, I just want more. And the sensation drips away minutes after, sometimes not even minutes after consuming it.
Can we just talk quickly about bioavailability? It's a word you've mentioned a couple of times. And I often wonder, is there a difference between eating raw versus cooked versus frozen? Is there different ways of getting access to these bioactive compounds?
First off, let me say, just get the fresh produce onto your table.
Okay. Don't overthink it.
Whether you enjoy it sauteed, steamed, in a soup, whatever it is, just make sure it's on your table. If you love charred greens, excellent, go for it. You're still going to be getting some bioactives. And what we know is that if you just have some every day, the cumulative effect over time is going to be good for you. But if you really want to pack a bioactive punch into your meal, then you want to look at the particular cultivar that you're eating. If you're eating cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts and broccoli, yes, lightly steaming them is going to be one of the best ways to release the glucosinolates from those cruciferous vegetables into your body.
One that I've heard about is spinach. Spinach needs some vitamin C. So I always put a bit of lemon juice on my spinach salad in the morning. I don't know if that's helping or not.
It is. Yep. Vitamin C is helping the absorption of iron from your spinach, which is the best way to go. In fact, the Turkish with their gozlem have got it right for centuries, however old gozlem is.
So I looked up how old gozlem is, and I couldn't find the answer. Definitely centuries, if not millennia. But this traditional Turkish food combines simple bread with feta cheese, spinach, and a squeeze of lemon over the top. So good and so bioavailable. Who knew? You knew, or at least you do now. So what are some other ways of maximizing bioavailability of the foods you're eating?
And that's exactly right. So, some of these synergies you really want to maximize. Sometimes it's released by heating. Carrots, for example, you're still going to get beta carotene from a raw carrot, but if you really want to make sure that you're getting vitamin A, then you want to boil that carrot and drizzle a little bit of olive oil on it, because the olive oil helps carry that beta carotene into your bloodstream. And like I said, the way I'm describing this science might be imperfect, but it's just to encourage people to understand that if you're eating a bioactive rich meal, it's going to be benefiting your body. There are ways that you can very easily release those bioactives and make them much more bioavailable. Sometimes it's about storing them properly, making sure that you're putting your onions and garlic in the pantry, and things like a mushroom you might want to put out into the sun for 20 minutes before eating it to increase the vitamin D concentration, so that when you eat it, you're going to get much better health benefits from that mushroom.
I did not know this. Did you know this? I looked at the research and it shows that putting mushrooms into sunlight before eating them dramatically increases the amount of vitamin D in them. And vitamin D is important for so many things. I've made a video all about it, check that out. But more importantly, next time you're cooking up some mushrooms, put them out in the sun, gills up, before cooking or eating them. And the vitamin D levels will skyrocket straight into your diet. That's crazy.
But at the end of the day, as long as a mushroom's part of your diet, then you're still going to be benefiting from it.
I like that. So it can be some small changes based on how a food is prepared, but ultimately, as long as we're getting more of these foods, that's a very strong start. What do you hope to achieve long-term with your work, Paul? What's the big picture goal for you?
I take that question very personally. I would love to achieve a better work-life balance. It's not just about eating healthy, it's also about having a good sleep cycle, about having better quality time with my family, and also ensuring that I'm getting a little bit of exercise in as well. And that work-life balance is really tricky, right? Because when you've got one eye on your career, you get seduced to make sacrifices when it comes to going to the gym, eating healthy, and eating into your sleep time. It never ceases to amaze me that some of the people who are charged with being in charge of our health, doctors, nurses, some of them have some of the worst health practices because they work in an industry that doesn't necessarily favor work-life balance, which I think is really horrible. If we can't give work-life balance to the people charged with helping us achieve good health, then what does that say about our society?
Yeah, it doesn't really make sense. The biggest example for me is seeing medical doctors out the front of the hospital having a cigarette because their work is so stressful.
And I think it comes down to slowing down. I'd love to encourage not just more bioactive rich meals among households, but also to slow down in the enjoyment of that. And part of the anxiety that drives people towards long shelf life food, and there's nothing wrong with long shelf life food. My pantry's full of it. It's just that part of the anxiety that drives us to make those decisions as opposed to getting the fresh produce is because we live such fast lifestyles. And when you slow down, you start to realize, wow, I'm getting much more quality time. I'm actually enjoying this so much more. And also just, getting better sleep and perhaps having a better attitude and orientation to the rest of the world. I think I would in saying all this, I don't discount the cultural context and its impact upon our decisions in the supermarket.
That's some really good advice and very ideal way to live. We should all probably slow down a little bit, think a bit more about what we're eating, take a bit more time for ourselves and our families, the people around us. I think that is super important.
On a side note, a side hustle used to be an option and now it's almost an imperative and it's exhausting. It's like, whatever happened to valuing a siesta? In saying that, I'm not trying to valorize being lazy. I'm saying that having a siesta is part of having an enjoyable life. And being afforded the time to do that actually makes us happier, healthier people.
I did some research and apparently siestas or naps actually improve memory formation, subsequent learning, emotional processing, and overall brain function. Personally, I'm not much of a napper, but I think what Paul is saying is that we should all make sure to take some time for ourselves and do whatever we feel like. Maybe it's take a nap. Maybe it's enjoying some time with friends or family. Maybe it's just reading a good book. But make sure to take some time for yourself. This is your life, so live it how you want.
There is a huge gap here in the sense that we don't have a lot of knowledge about bioactives. It is a fairly recent phenomenon in the literature. So if you look at the scientific literature and the scientific interest in bioactives, it was growing from about the 60s and 70s, 1960s, 1970s. But we sort of see it really come to the fore at about the same time that the microbiome becomes popular in the 2010s. And so the science of bioactives is still very much in the scientific domain. And in saying that, I agree with your sentiment that we need to popularize the discussion about bioactives and not have it just dominated by the scientific community or the corporate community, because what I don't want to see happen is corporate capture of the science of bioactives in the sense that they become so esoteric from everyday knowledge that we no longer have command over our own needs. And so I don't know if you've ever done this, but I've sometimes been in the supplement aisle going, oh, what's a natural source of glucosamine, or where can I naturally get quercetin? And I remember first learning about quercetin during COVID and going, oh, there's a study here that says that quercetin can reduce the symptoms of COVID. So maybe it's a good preventative to put some quercetin into my diet. And when I first looked up quercetin, I couldn't figure out where it came from. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just try the supplement. And it turns out you can get quercetin from your onions and your apples.
Yeah, like I was already getting this.
You also get it from lots of other things as well in smaller doses. And so just having these as part of your regular diet is much healthier than taking a supplement. And the risk here with supplements is a bit more nefarious than you would imagine. We know, for example, EGCG, which is a bioactive from green tea, if you take it in too large doses, it can be toxic, can lead to liver toxicity. We know that in some cases, when you take a bioactive compound, say, for example, lycopene, concentrate it, extract it, concentrate it, turn it into a pill, it does nothing. It needs to be in the tomato to be able to do its work. And that work is accelerated if you add just a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. But in some cases, also like curcumin, what it's being cut with in order to extract it from the turmeric, we don't know. Some of what it's being cut with makes it into the product, and we're ingesting products that are not labelled on the side of the product because they're not official ingredients of the supplement. They are part of the process of making the supplement. People are also making synthetic compounds and claiming that it's the supplement. So you might not know whether or not the supplement is natural or synthetic. And there's some simple things like fish oils, for example. Fish oil is now packed into a tablet. When my mum took it as a kid, growing up in a boarding school, it was given to each student on a spoon, and so you could smell if that was rancid or not. But now, when it's packed into a pill, we no longer know if that omega-3 from that fish oil is actually alive, bioactive, or whether it's degraded and no longer doing us any good because we can't smell it anymore. Right? Sometimes, like we've seen with a company here in Australia, they're adding other supplements to the supplement that they're actually selling you. And by having several supplements with this added ingredient, in this case vitamin B or one particular version of vitamin B, people were getting an overdose of that particular vitamin B, which can bench press you into the cardiac ward if you have too much of it. It's a really great compound. You want to have it as part of a diet, and you'll never overdose on it if you're eating carrots. But if you extract it, concentrate it, and pack it into a pill, then you can absolutely overdose on it and have some problems. And so, to my mind, telling people to eat lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, there's only one vegetable I can think of off the top of my head that you don't want to eat too much of, and that is rhubarb, which was my grandmother's favourite. So I grew up eating apple and rhubarb pie. But it was always, just have one slice, Paul, or I think I did eat the whole pie once. But, there are certain, other than that, I don't think there's many vegetables and fruits at the supermarket that you would buy that you could overdose on. But you can overdose from supplements.
What happens if you eat too much rhubarb?
I can't remember. I think there is a compound in there that our body can digest at certain levels, but beyond a certain concentration, our bodies are no longer able to digest it.
Right. So don't live off a diet of only rhubarb.
The other thing about the science of bioactives that I think is really important to think about is that in the 20th century of food science and nutrition and dietary recommendations, I see a history of people outsourcing their confidence in decision making to science, to a set of laboratory experiments done outside of their own body. And I think what that has done is undermined our own confidence in our sense of smell, our sense of taste, our ability to palpate fruit and vegetables and decide and look at them and decide whether or not we think they're ripe, whether we think they're good for cooking today or tomorrow. People express their anxiety about things like avocados. Oh, you've got to pick it on the right day. And it's, oh gosh, you buy an avocado, you never know if you're actually going to eat it or if you're going to miss the window. And I think part of that is because part of that drives people to make decisions at the supermarket that are driven by the comfort of that nutrient labeling on the side of a packet, because they've lost the trust in their own body to make decisions about what ingredients blend well together in their own lives. And we're denied a lot of that education at school. We don't have education systems. We don't have many education systems across the globe that actually teach food tech. In fact, we call it food tech instead of just teaching cultural cuisine. I think Japan's one of the few countries that has qualified chefs trained to work in schools. And that's quite unusual in pedagogical systems across the world. And so what that does is when you're taught science at school, in the absence of doing any natural kitchen experiments with your own food to see what tastes good, what feels good, what looks good, it takes away your confidence and it says, oh, but don't worry, science has all the answers here. Look at the nutrient labeling and your recommended daily intakes and you're getting everything you need. It's all written here on this label. And what I would love to restore is a confidence that if you just steam a vegetable, it's going to be delivering lots of health benefits. It's going to be much better for you than opting for something that has been highly processed and all the health modulating benefits of it have been taken away.
There's something to be said about, as we keep coming back to, just having some simple fruits, vegetables in your diet and not overcomplicating or not getting sucked into the hype of this special food that comes in a package and is highly processed and it's supposed to have these benefits, but you can just keep it simple.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Paul, what do you do when you're not in a lab or when you're outside of your job? What do you do in your spare time?
I'm actually a non-practicing laboratory scientist. I haven't been in the lab for over 20 years. And I say that because I'm a field-hardened anthropologist. I've worked in global health in Vietnam and Papua New Guinea and in community arts projects in Indonesia and Brazil. And I've done a lot of field research, even worked on human research biobanks, but looking at the ethical and regulatory environments for human research biobanks. But outside of those pursuits, what I really love is music, dance, and a whole host of other hobbies, board games, and martial arts. And I don't say that flippantly. Musical training has been a wonderful way for me to learn the discipline to apply myself to each new topic that I've worked on. Dance has also just given me sort of the ability to learn how to go with the flow, learn how to move with the ebb and flow of the workplace, to read the room, to give you a bit of situational awareness. Martial arts has also been a really wonderful teacher. I've got a lot of cross-training from martial arts that I've applied, not just in professional practice, and I'm not talking about the punches and kicks here. I'm talking about the ability to assess a situation, the ability to step back from, when someone metaphorically slaps you in the face, and that can happen in the workplace as much as it can happen in the home, but the ability to not react instantaneously, but to think about, okay, oh, that just happened. Interesting. What brought that into being and what can I learn from that? And so, learning how to take a punch is a really valuable skill. And I don't say that in the spirit of toxic masculinity. I say that in the spirit of it taught me how to be teachable. It taught me that if I got hurt learning martial arts, it's because I made a mistake. What mistake did I do, and how can I improve that the next time? And it taught me that in a much more confronting manner than music and dance alone taught me. You make lots of mistakes in music and you address them and you fix them, but you rarely, if ever, get a bruise from them. That bruise will teach you something much more than the music will. And I love board games. COVID really brought that to the fore for me. My family were making board games as much as we were playing them. And I think they're just such a fantastic resource of learning how to apply strategic thinking, probabilistic analysis, planning skills, but also the situational awareness of just turn taking and algorithm unpacking. And I think there's so many skills that are hidden in playing board games that make it a fun environment for learning some really helpful skills that you can use in trying to make sense of the science of bioactives or trying to make sense of interpersonal relationships in your personal life or the professional life.
Yeah, very cool. I love it. Any board game recommendations?
I feel like I'm being seduced here. Absolutely. Everyone should go out and buy my board game Hexcrement, which is a conservation education board game about dung beetles. It's available in over a dozen stores in Australia, and we do send copies overseas quite regularly. It's being played in France, Romania, Germany, Denmark.
This game looks epic, and Paul told me that it's actually Australia's #2 board game. It took me a moment to get that joke, but the game is for 1 to 6 players, teenagers and adults, maybe a bit complicated for little ones, but it's fun, funny, and educational. So if you're interested, go and get yourself a copy of the board game Hexcrement. Meanwhile, these guys are also thinking about creating a board game based around bioactives.
We've play-tested a role-playing game where people have to eat different fruits or vegetables in order to get boons in the dungeon. And that's worked really well with some kids. In fact, I saw a kid whose father told me, my kid hates leafy greens, will not eat them. In fact, don't even offer them to him. And then his father went to the bathroom and this boy was like, give me the leafy greens. I want that boon for my character, which was great,
I have a couple of listener questions, Paul. But before that, each week here on Travelling Science, we make a donation to a charity of the guest's choosing. And this week, Dr. Paul Mason has chosen to make a donation to the Plus One Serve Foundation, which focuses on research and programs that drive increased vegetable consumption across Australia, helping communities grow healthier and supporting our local farmers and the veggie industry. So a donation has been made to Plus One Serve on behalf of Paul Mason. And if you'd like to make a donation as well, that would be incredible. The link is in the description just down below. But now let's get into those listener questions. Danny from wanted to ask, we might have already covered this, are frozen fruits and vegetables less healthy than fresh fruits and vegetables?
Are frozen fruits and vegetables less healthy than fresh fruits and vegetables? My first answer to that is whatever gets them into your diet, do that. If buying frozen makes sure that you put them in your smoothie every morning, fantastic. I wouldn't be too worried about whether you're buying fresh or frozen. But if it's a pre-made smoothie that's frozen, for example, then that might contain added ingredients that might not necessarily be needed by your body.
Yeah, you touched on this before. So it's kind of like you just want to be going for the single ingredient sort of frozen things, not a pre-made mixture of anything. I've got another question. Kaylar says, my partner doesn't like fruits or veggies. Is he going to be okay?
Look, I'm not going to speak about someone's partner, but
maybe just gently advise them to try. You know these people that are like, I only eat steak.
Yeah. Look, I find it hard to believe when people say that I don't eat vegetables and fruit. I find it really hard to believe. I was like, how do you not include that in your diet? Like, they're so delicious. And, most burgers come with a few things slapped in there. Tomato, lettuce. The one thing I know from science is that if you want to get someone to eat more fruits and vegetables, don't do it all in one big hit. What you do is gradually over time, you put a second leaf of lettuce into that hamburger 1 week, and then you put a third leaf the week after that. And then you gradually make the patty smaller maybe, or you gradually put in an extra slice of tomato. Maybe then you put in a few little bits of onion. And that gradual introduction of more vegetables over time will eventually lead to a very vegetable-rich diet. And we know that people who are eating 30 or more different varieties of fruits and vegetables in a week have a really healthy gut microbiome.
Alrighty, Paul, thank you so much for answering those listener questions. Just to finish off, I have a quick lightning round for you, if you're ready. All right, first question. Who inspires you the most? It can be anyone, living or dead.
Louis Pasteur was pretty cool.
Louis Pasteur was pretty cool. He was a French scientist living and working in the 1800s, and he discovered so much during his time. Probably the most important being the fact that beer and wine was being spoiled by teeny tiny little microbes, but by heating it up slightly, they could kill all of the microbes and save their product, a process modestly named pasteurization. He also proved germ theory, created several vaccines. This guy surely would have won a Nobel Prize if they had them back in the 1800s, which they didn't. If you could do something completely different with your life, something completely outside of what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
I'd be sitting at a piano, writing music, and going for long walks in the bush and meditating when I wake up in the morning.
That sounds lovely. And I would argue that you could fit that into your current life, but you'll get there. What do you love most about anthropology?
Anthropology is my intellectual and spiritual home.
Nice. What do you hate most about anthropology?
That it's not better known. That it in Australia at least, it's quite an obscure discipline. I didn't even know what it was until my third year in my undergraduate in biomedical science.
If you had a huge budget, what sort of experiments would you be doing with bioactives?
Well, in talking about a huge budget, the 20th century was a massive experiment funded by an incredibly vast amount of money in ultra-processed foods. What we've learnt from that massive experiment is just how unhealthy they are for human populations. So if I had the same budget today for the 21st century, I would look at methods of agriculture that enhanced the bioactives in our fresh produce. Not to look at food as medicine, but to look at it as a method of prevention. To look at the ways in which food security, bolstering food security from farm to table in localities all across the world, can lower rates of infectious disease and chronic disease in living populations. And poverty and malnutrition and all that as well. I think we have I think a lot of the world's problems boil down to not just food security, but also food sustainability and massive problems with monocrops.
I 100% agree. And I want to give you that funding. I can't, but someone please fund this man. Do you have a favorite bioactive compound?
Not the compound itself, but the words. I love the fact that most bioactive compounds have these long, complicated words. Most of them, my colleagues and I have only ever read. We don't know whether or not we're pronouncing them correctly. Glucosinolates doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. EGCG we always pronounce it as an acronym because...
Epigallocalcinates, I feel like.
Yep, that's the one, catechins.
Here's a few more fun bioactive names for you to research, if you can spell them. Resveratrol, lycopene, lignin, tannins, indoles, quercetin, cyanidin, cycloalin, adjoine, hesperidin, beta-silosterol, anthocyanin, proanthocyanidins, caffeoylquinic acid, pentaogalloyl beta-D-glucose, epigallocatechin gallate, and polyethylene glycol polylactic coglycolic acid quercetin. Whew.
Yeah, I like the words themselves because I like long words and I like the way that the fricative sound of the consonants and I love the rhythm of words. Yeah.
Fantastic. Dr. Paul Mason, you are an incredible being. You've done so much in the world of anthropology, and you've traveled around the world and done science in various other countries as a traveling scientist. I appreciate that. And now you're here basically getting paid to tell people to eat more fruits and vegetables.
Eat more fruits and vegetables, Jesse.
And explaining why they are so good for us. You do incredible work. Thank you so much for coming on Traveling Science today. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And just to finish off, considering everything we've discussed here today, what do you think is the number one thing that listeners could take away? Number one thing they could do to go home and improve their lives in some way?
Take more time. Take more time to choose the fresh produce, to choose bioactive rich vegetables and fruit, and give yourself that time. It's an act of self-care.
So there you have it, legends. That was Dr. Paul Mason talking all about the science of bioactives, highlighting what's wrong with the supplement industry and explaining why we would all benefit from eating less highly processed foods and more fruits and vegetables. And my biggest takeaway from this discussion were the tips and tricks that Paul shared around increasing the bioavailability of our fruits and vegetables. Pour some olive oil on your tomatoes. Cook your carrots rather than eating them raw. Squeeze some lemon onto your spinach. Even put your mushrooms into the sun. All of these simple acts greatly improve the benefits of eating those foods. But also remember that at the end of the day, as long as you are getting them into your diet, that's better than nothing. So if you don't want to use olive oil or lemon or cook your carrots or put your mushrooms outside, that's fine. As long as you're still eating foods like this, it's better than inhaling some packaged snack from the supermarket that probably contains plenty of preservatives and sugar that your body just does not need. Finally, Paul's take-home message was to take more time. More time to think about and prepare healthy foods, but also more time to relax and enjoy life, to spend time with friends and family. It's so easy to get wrapped up in the chaos of our world, to get distracted and busy yourself with things that really aren't that important. So try to make some time for yourself this week and every week moving forward. It truly is an act of self-care. To learn more about Dr. Paul Mason, follow Sociocerebral on Instagram. And you can also follow Fresh Produce Bioactives on Instagram for plenty of awesome tips and ideas on how you can get more of these bioactives into your diet to live a smarter, happier, and healthier life. That's what this show is all about. So if you want to do that, make sure you're following us for more traveling science every few weeks. Follow along on Instagram where you can send in your listener questions, and check out The Traveling Scientist on YouTube if you're more visually oriented. Finally, if you listen to the end of each episode, I always leave you with a little secret. And this week's secret is that I got a Nutribullet for Christmas last year because I just loved making smoothies. I would make a banana and berry smoothie like every day, thinking it was super healthy. But one of the first things that Paul ever taught me was that if you put bananas and berries together, the polyphenol oxidase from the bananas actually hinders the absorption of the antioxidants from the berries, making it less healthy than if you had bananas and berries separately. This information frustrated me, and for one brief moment, I hated Paul. But then I got over it and we became good friends. And now I have a banana mango smoothie on some mornings and a berry avocado smoothie on other mornings. Hell yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, legends. Catch you in the next one. Cheers.